the March 20 Civil Service meeting to order. Dana, could you take roll call, please?
Alderman Barber.
Here.
Alderman Nelson.
Here.
Alderman Holtfer is not yet here. Dale Weichel.
Here.
Tom Trainer.
Here.
Richard Budney.
Here.
Frank Presko.
Here.
And Sarah Lynn Emmons is absent. Presko.
Here.
And Sarah Lynn Emmons is absent.
Okay, could we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item is citizen comment period. Is there any citizen that would like to make any comments? Hearing none, we'll close citizen comment period. Item 3 is approval of the minutes from 11/21/22. I'll take a minute so all of you can get Jack on.
I'll make a motion to approve unless there's any corrections.
Second.
Any comments, questions? Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4, approval of a job description for the position of community service officer. Approval of a job description for the position of community service officer in the police department. I'm not sure if I say captain or general.
Assistant Chief.
Assistant Chief will work, that's fine.
I'm used to star being general,
Okay.
but anyway. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, this will be a new position within the police department. It's a non-sworn position. The duties are just to take care of things that you don't need a sworn officer to do. Things like traffic control, vacation home checks. They could actually assist an officer and it could take several hours. Just a lot of different various duties that you just don't really need a sworn officer to do. And then free that officer up to go out and patrol the streets.
It's an awful lot of responsibility for someone who might be 18 years old that would want to take on this job.
It could be. It would go into this.
How
They
long
would
does that
just-
last?
I would envision probably about 2 weeks. Like, that's an intensive training program before they actually go on the road. And we would kind of slowly work the person into this. Now this is, keep in mind, this is someone who's going to be attending college with the goal of becoming a police officer. So this is,
So how would that work? Is this a full-time position?
no, not, at least right now, not a full-time position. We didn't write that in here as a full or part-time so that we could potentially, in the future, maybe go with a full-time position, but this would be part-time, anywhere between 12 and 20 hours a week, depending upon the person's school, between 12 and 20 hours a week, depending upon the person's school schedule, because they would be attending college.
Okay.
How will you recruit people?
Potentially in the different area
Not just the
colleges, yes, and probably online as well, like we have our other positions.
How soon do we want to get this filled?
The sooner the better. The problem we're running into right now is we have so many police officers right now in training that we're kind of almost out of trainers right now. It would be nice to have them in place prior to summer so they can do some of the vacation home checks because obviously depend on our availability of trainers.
Alderman Nelson?
What is the rate of pay?
We talked to Dana. I think we're thinking somewhere between $15 and $18 an hour.
The Greenfield just posted theirs at 14 an hour.
Okay.
So if we can be a little higher, that'd be great. That was my only comment to that.
Do they carry a weapon?
Duties will this position, or a sworn officer have that this will not have?
Well, this person does not have arrest powers. They do not have a firearm. Like I said, it would be low risk type of calls, like a disabled vehicle. Sometimes this person could sit in a marked vehicle, or at least a vehicle with lights on it, to free up an officer to go out and take other calls.
Okay.
It's going to be low risk, low priority calls.
Alderman Hofer?
I thought the job description was nicely done. I guess the question I have, and this might not exactly be our forte here, but be our forte here, but speaking of Greenfield, their guy would go around and check people parking in handicap spots, and if they park crooked at the target, and we're not gonna get into that kind of minutia with them. Or her.
We could, like I said, we're probably going to start off.
Or her.
We could, like I said, we're probably going to start off slow because this is obviously a new position for us. See how many hours that we can fill. See if it's one position or two positions. Could they do parking enforcement? Yeah, they could. They could do that.
Well, I saw that parking enforcement was in.
Yeah, they could. They could do that.
Well, I saw that parking enforcement was in there. I was thinking more like, when there's no overnight parking and things like that.
Yeah, so you would like them to enforce handicap parking? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
No, I'm
Or-
saying I don't necessarily want them focused too much on you parked your car crooked, you parked your car crooked in the line, and
I don't envision that's what they'd be used for.
because I know people that have been ticketed for that in Greenfield with their
Oh.
officer.
Might be an overzealous community service officer there, possibly.
Yeah.
We want to work with our.
I just want to make sure
citizens.
he's as useful as can be. Not-
Yeah, some tickets. It depends on the type. Like traffic tickets, yes. Like a retail theft ticket or something like that. That would be a sworn officer that would do that.
Couple questions. First of all, is this person going to be uniformed?
Yes.
And the unsuspecting public has a squad car pull up behind them with lights on. And how do they know that this is a community service officer and not a police officer?
Good question. A couple different things. We're looking at having a different uniform so they don't appear to be a police officer. And that won't be the same as ours, like a polo or something like that. And then we're also won't be the same as ours, like a polo or something like that. And then we're also looking at probably not having them in a marked car, a car that may have lights. But most likely not a marked car. We're still discussing that, but that's the direction we're heading right now.
Okay. Thank you.
There are some agencies, I know West Dallas is one where to your point, sir, is they do like a lot like the officers. And they do things, they'll take crash reports, they will go out and take parking complaints. And I think it's a great use of a resource to not have a sworn officer dealing with a simple parking holder, with the zealousness, and we want to make sure that that's in check. But when you've got a list of calls waiting and you've got a parking complaint or you got a simple PDO crash, it's nice to be able to have that option to give the CSO that work. It makes perfect sense. I applaud those that were involved in getting this program going, and I think it'll be good for the city.
Excellent idea, especially if their goal is to become a police officer at some point in time. And I think what we have to do is, if indeed some duo training, what would a police officer expect as far as training goes versus a CSO and his or her training? It's an excellent idea.
I have a thought. When you swear in an officer, he's empowered with a certain amount of responsibilities, arrest responsibilities, things of that nature. Now, this person will not have those type of powers because they're not sworn in at that level. Powers because they're not sworn in at that level. Is that right?
That is correct.
So they'd have to call for backup if they see something that needs to be.
Yes, absolutely.
Make a motion to approve the job description.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the job description. Any further comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. She's saving my voice. Item 5, description for emergency services dispatcher. Dana, you want to start, or should we have fire department start?
No, it's not fire department. It would be Captain Lehrman. I'm sorry, Assistant Chief Lehrman. I got to get used to
Okay.
that.
Oh, okay.
The main change on this job description is
What?
the typing test.
35 words a minute.
It was in here at one point that we had to give all of the applicants the typing test, which got very cumbersome. Our software package to be able to do the typing test no longer worked. And at one point, we thought somebody That fell through at some point, and we have not been giving the typing test for years. We now have an applicant that we don't know if he would pass or not, but quite honestly, he's been doing a dispatcher job for over 20 years, and he's been fine at his other employer, and we really don't believe that his other employer, and we really don't believe that the typing exam is that important. Typing speed isn't really indicative of the job, it's familiarity with knowing how to use a computer, which is more important, and that's hard to test.
So you're looking for a motion to approve the change?
No,
So you're looking for a motion to approve the change?
no.
I'm sorry.
Yes, and I don't know if Assistant Chief Lehrman wants to address any other changes that they made, but they're very minor adjustments.
The most significant was the typing test.
It went from a union contract to a grade 5. What is the,
I didn't bring that with me, but that is really not a change. That happened when we did our class and comp study back in December 2015, and the job description was never adjusted to reflect it. It's been a salary grade 5 for years.
okay.
Okay. Do you have anything further comment on this, or?
Just with this, with that would be a lateral, they wouldn't need the telecommunicator exam either at this point.
Correct. Because that was the other adjustment that was put in there, was that laterals will not have to take the test, which that's been the
Yep.
practice for quite some time. It's more
Yep.
just having the job description come into line with practice. Having the job description come into line with practice. Typing is not as relevant as it used to be. Dispatchers used to have to type a lot of dictated reports. The officers now come in with typing skills that they usually type their own. And those that don't type their own reports, they have the ability to. And those that don't type their own reports, they have the ability to actually dictate into their phone, and it goes right into our CAD or RMS program. So it kind of removes the ability or the necessity for dispatchers to type fast. They're typing small amounts of words at a time, nothing type fast. They're typing small amounts of words at a time, nothing significant anymore.
Any further questions, comments? Is someone prepared to make a motion to approve?
Motion?
Motion made and seconded to approve the emergency service. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Health insurance covered for COVID testing after the end of pandemic. Dana, I know you love hearing this.
For insurance carrier know on how we want COVID vaccines and testing to be covered once the pandemic ends, which is scheduled for May 11th. The only two things that really affect our plan are the COVID vaccines and the COVID testing. We don't have the other, and the COVID testing. We don't have the other issues going on in our plan that the emergency caused. So for the vaccines, we have a choice of a couple different things, and right now they're being covered anywhere you go to get a vaccine, but we've only been having to pay the administrative charges. The federal government has been actually paying the vaccine charges. As of May 11th, we will end up having to pay the vaccine charges as well. It is still going to be a requirement that the cost to us, but we don't have to cover them outside of our normal network. So really, the only decision is whether we want to cover them only in-network or in and out-of-network. I would recommend that they be covered the same as any other types of network. For the,
Go ahead, Dana.
I was going to say, for the other issue, for the testing, that one gets a little bit more complicated because it is not a requirement that we even cover testing any longer. Most places are no longer going to cover the home tests. We can eliminate testing altogether if we want to, or we could cover them just in network, or we can cover them out of network.
Are we
Alderman first, and Tom, you're second. Alderman?
All done?
Well, I was just gonna say that my recommendation would be to cover it just the same as we cover other things like flu testing, which would be covering it in network only.
Do we have a budget line for this, or do we have an estimate of what our costs could be?
I do have an idea. Just have to find my sheet here real quick. The vaccine part of it is hard to tell how many vaccines people are still going to be. As this goes on, I think less and less people are getting their booster shots. Right now in 2022, we did 248 vaccines that we were charged for. $1 a vaccine because we were only paying the administrative charges. If we now have to pay also the vaccine charge, that can jump up to about $165 a vaccine. So we spent just over $10,000 this past year, and it could about $40,000. The tests, on the other hand, would go down because we probably will not cover the home tests. We did 1,209 tests in 2022, and it was a total of about $34,000.
Tom?
Are we requiring people to be vaccinated when they come on board as far as new employees? We don't.
No, we don't even ask.
Holderman?
So 243, are you saying that we are allowing people to take multiple over the course of the year? I mean, I look at it a couple different ways. It's if I'm an employee here and I have my doctor, and I prefer to use my doctor so they're I understand out of network, in network. It's more of a cost, but I just think that more people feel comfortable dealing with their own private physician.
But that would still be covered because 99% of our,
Okay.
yeah, and that would be covered, or going to Walgreens, CVS, those would all be in network.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So there really isn't a detriment to not covering out of network. Very few of our employees use out of network providers.
Yeah, I think it would make sense to cover it in network as you do any other flu shots from a understanding point. If they have to do one thing for a flu shot and it's something different for a flu shot and it's something different for the COVID shot, it doesn't make much sense. They can probably wind up people who are going to get the COVID shots on a regular basis are probably going to do the flu shot and COVID at the same time each year.
Right.
Going to do the flu shot and COVID at the same time each year.
Right.
And the people who don't get flu shots won't get the COVID shot either.
Why are we, the term COVID, that's only specific to that, that's only specific to that one disease, the virus that has just hit. So if a new virus, which is not totally unthinkable, hits, then we would have to go back and readdress this policy?
Remember, there's variations to the present COVID.
Right.
There's 6 or something.
Right,
of
but
that
COVID
nature.
is still a certain disease. I mean, there can be another one that can arise. And my point is that if we have a policy like this, should we not just make it a policy that covers all of the potential viruses?
Is how we cover it in our insurance plan, and the only reason we're having to deal with it now is because it had been mandated that we had to cover it under the federal emergency. now that it's no longer a federal emergency, we're saying we should now cover it the same as we do any other kind of.
So that's just what I had said, so that if something becomes a Tom virus, excuse me for using that analogy, then that would still be treated the same for the employees.
Yeah.
As far as the testing. Just that COVID is as far as the testing. Just that COVID is distinctive because they passed federal regulations on it.
Yeah.
Alderman?
Well, I was just going to ask for clarification on that. So if another wave happened and the government did it, we would just adjust accordingly. Wave happened and the government did it, we would just adjust accordingly.
Correct.
But this sets the precedent for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
At times, they have added extra vaccines, things like
Shingles.
vaccines over the years, and we've always treated them the same as all of our other vaccines. And we would continue to do that unless something happened to declare a federal mandate where we had to do it differently.
All right. Is anybody prepared to make a motion, or do you want? Okay. How many what's your thoughts on the testing? You want to keep on doing testing?
If I may, the last sentence here, staff recommends option 3 that would treat COVID testing the same as or strep throat testing. So do we go through and ask who wants number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5?
I think this cover both of them.
You know, what's the most advantageous for the employees?
Exactly.
Dana?
The most advantageous for the employees would be number 1, which would continue it the way it currently is, where we pay for everything. That's
Which-
just different than how we treat other testing.
Which would be about $165 per head.
Other testing.
Which would be about $165 per head per vaccine administered.
But that's vaccine, this is testing.
Testing is $34,000 at this point.
Testing is probably a little cheaper because the home kits are usually around $25 a home test. It's around $100 for most of the other tests.
Okay. Does everybody feel that we should continue testing?
Yes.
Yes.
Everybody feels that way? Okay. Let's break that down. Are we going to do it 100% in-network? Continue subject to cost sharing, exclude all over-the-counter tests, and exclude all COVID-19 tests. I think we already said that number 5 is out. So 3,
Number 3. That staff recommends.
okay. What kind of, okay, is anybody else think 3 is the way to go?
Well, I'll yield to Ed first.
Well, I would agree if you.
We're not on the motion yet. So we have 3 that are okay with 3.
John, did you?
Well, that was, I guess that's the thing that I'm looking at, option number 1,
Yes.
which we, as a city, cover for the employee, because I'm also looking at the,
John, did you?
well, that was, I guess that's the thing that I'm looking at, option number 1,
Yes.
which we, as a city, cover for the employee, because I'm also looking at the larger pictures. I want more, if people are sick, I don't want them here, I don't want them spreading a virus, I don't want our staff depleting. So on larger pictures, I want more, if people are sick, I don't want them here, I don't want them spreading a virus, I don't want our staff depleting. So I'm just looking at it as if I'd rather make that investment up front, that if they wish to test or wish to vaccinate, that's their thing, then great, whatever. I just don't want a large and something bad happening to the staff.
Okay.
And that is true, because if you do number 3, it's subject to the cost sharing, which means you may have to meet your deductible if you're on the high deductible plan. before the plan is gonna pay for your test. So if
Well,
you're
what is
worried
it for
about
the
people
other,
not,
the other, like flu and that? Is there cost sharing with them?
I don't see a lot of people go in for a flu test.
Do they even?
They have flu tests. I
I don't
know they're
even-
coming
do
out
they?
with over-the-counter ones, but
Okay.
you don't see flu tests.
Okay,
You don't see flu tests.
okay.
Not like we've seen with COVID.
Okay. So you're in favor of covering 100%?
Option one, yes.
Okay. Who else is in favor of option one?
I am.
I'm going to recant my app.
Okay, so it's 4
Okay.
for 1, 2 for 3.
And I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, the motion is that we will continue as is covering all testing.
That's my
Yeah,
motion,
correct.
option number one, yes.
And you second it? Okay. Any other comments on this? Motion carries. Now,
Are you doing a separate motion for the vaccine?
Pardon?
Are you doing a separate motion for the vaccine?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next we're going to go with vaccination. What's everybody's thought on that? The other tests, or I mean, other vaccinations,
That'd be number 2, continue 100% in network.
No, there's no options listed for that. I just put the recommendation is to cover all of them at an in-network provider, as long as you're at an in-network provider. And almost all employees use in-network providers.
I'd
If
make that
not-
motion.
So is that number 2, or is there a number 2, or from what you said?
There's not a number. You would just make the motion to continue COVID vaccines at in-network, continue COVID vaccines at in-network providers.
So moved.
Second.
okay, motion made and seconded to continue covering COVID vaccinations at 100%.
It's required.
Yes.
Any further comments, questions, concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7, discussion regarding a potential non-represented employee resignation policy in order to receive vacation payouts. No action will be taken tonight. Okay. Dana?
Yeah, we wanted to just start the discussion on this, no action to be taken tonight, because I think people need to be able to have a chance to think about this one a little bit and see where it's headed. Peggy had brought to the mayor's attention before she left, and he asked for it to be put on the personnel committee's agenda to talk about. Currently, almost all employees do give a 2-week notice when they leave, but there is no written policy that requires it. There's a written policy in the 14-day resignation notice when they leave. Otherwise, it could affect their standing with the city, where you may not be able to be rehired, might not get a good reference. But outside of the civil service group, there's nothing in the handbook. State law does not require any employer to give vacation. And because we elect to give vacation, we can decide how it's paid out at the time of somebody's termination. However, you are required to pay it out unless you have something in a written policy stating what the ramifications are or what the requirements are to get that payout. So right now, if somebody quits with no notice, we have to pay all their accrued vacation.
How frequently does that happen?
It doesn't happen on the bottom of the second page, that in the last just over 5 years, since the beginning of 2018, we've had 89 non-rep employees that have quit or retired. Of that, 69 of them gave the proper 2-week notice. Of the course was because of death. 3 of them had to stop working because of a medical reason. They just were not able to come back to work. 8 others were either terminated or resigned because they weren't gonna pass probation. And 5 left during their probationary period, which for them. So it really only ended up being 3 people that quit with notice that we could have possibly not paid out their vacation.
And those were, they didn't give notice because of medical issues.
No, those 3 weren't because of medical. They just left for other reasons and didn't give the 2-week notice.
Okay.
One of them was going to give a 2-week notice, but wanted to take the second week as vacation. Well, we don't allow that. So had we have said that he was going to lose his vacation time if he didn't give the 2-week notice, had we have said that he was going to lose his vacation time if he didn't give the 2-week notice, he probably would have given the 2-week notice. So I really think there's only 2 people that wouldn't have given notice and would have forfeited their vacation, and it was very small amounts. I think Peggy's biggest concern is that it could, we could start having more of these cases as people tend to job shop a little bit more. People don't stick with the same employer for 30 years anymore and have that same work ethic type of thing. And I think one of her concerns was a lot of our employees are paid through the payroll date, where when we calculate their paycheck, so if somebody were to quit, say on a Tuesday, they might already be being paid through Friday or Saturday and we're overpaying them. If that happens now, we take it out of their vacation balance.
Sure. Well, what's your?
Go ahead.
I mean, I know what I would do, but I want to. What are your thoughts on that to make a quick move on this?
I understand that it makes sense to do it. I'm just a little worried that we would have to have a lot of outs in the policy as to what kind of circumstances.
Right. That's
Yeah.
exactly my point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a dangerous slope.
Yeah.
If it's not,
And I'm worried if we don't treat people all the same.
everyone should be treated the same.
Yep.
And another concern to this is if we start going on these individual rabbit holes, and we could call it a trick bag. And if we're not seeing that many of them anyway, I mean, I don't know.
I guess my problem is that, like these last 3, we gotta look at us. And it does cost the city money if they don't give us 2 weeks' notice. Now, I think there's enough notice that they can give us. 2 weeks is not that bad. A lot of employers, so why can't they give it to us? You know, and I don't like the idea of somebody coming in and say, I'm using my 2 weeks' notice and I'm done. That's not the purpose.
But then what kind of employer are you getting? Oh, sorry, one, sir.
Say that again, please.
I was saying, well, then, but this employee's already got the mindset that they 2 weeks.
I understand,
You know,
My
but
concern is,
they're not the type of employee that has been helping the city to start with that.
So let's
I
get
guess
them
is
going.
it. So, you know, if they are not going to give us 2 weeks' notice, do they really care about it? I mean, they care, but, you know, if we have a policy, care about it? I mean, they care, but, you know, if we have a policy, I don't know.
I think the majority of employees are going to be conscientious and have that work ethic that they're going to still give the 2-week notice. I worry about the unforeseen circumstances where somebody loses their child care, and can no longer come to work, or is being harassed by their supervisor and just can't work with that person any longer. How are we going to deal with that?
great examples.
I think yes, you're right. It's a great example. First, when somebody
But
can't work with someone, we obviously have to do something from a personnel, human resources type standpoint of view. I think a lot of these on page 2, number 2, under Oak Creek, I think are very valid. And if I am just absolutely fed up with the city, those are vacation days that I've earned, vacation days that I earned. Though we're leaving on a bad note, you know, on a sour note, that I'm leaving and I've had it, I can't take anymore. It's really stressing me out. I'm very anxious about it. I still think that we should be able to pay somebody something that they've earned. That's just my opinion.
Frank, and then Alderman.
I think, you know, there's some value in treating everybody the same. However, my mindset is, are we treating people fairly? And I know that can be a slippery slope, depending on what kinds of processes you have in place to make that fair decision. But I think we can construct that. For instance, the one where somebody's being harassed, and after you sit down and you talk to the person and you find that's a valid concern, should we not be able to make the decision and say, in order to treat that employee fairly, we made that decision? Else comes by years later and says the same thing, but then you make a informed decision that no, there was a misunderstanding or something. I've always had an issue with treating people equally and treating fairly. I'd like to see us go the fair path rather than the
Alderman
equal.
Barber.
I like the idea of the inclusion of some language that makes it more substantial, in the sense that just say, well, my employer would like to have 2 weeks, you know, and then just say, well, my employer would like to have 2 weeks, you know, and then it's like, this would give it some
Teeth.
benefit to give it the 2 weeks, to make that as a written statement. I think these items in number two cover all the circumstances very well, including number H, which is potential other reasons to waive requirement. I mean, that could be an individual case kind of analysis. And that would be fair to everybody. But just to have that language that fortifies, those are my thoughts.
Is there any sentiment to pay out a certain percentage of their sick leave or vacation if they don't give 2 weeks' notice?
That's a lot of paperwork then, and a lot of.
What's that?
That's a lot of.
And to Dana's points that she made, you know, what if it is some exigent circumstances and we didn't want to hold them up? So, and maybe to Frank's point too, is we want to be across the board equal. So I just say if they earned it, it's theirs, whether it's 2 weeks or not, pay it.
It's a hard call because still would have, they're only talking about 17 hours of payout or 3 hours of payout.
Minimal.
Where we have other employees that are out there that have 240 hours of vacation on the books or even 300 hours of vacation on the books. That's a huge amount to lose if for something happens and they can't give that notice.
Well,
something happens and they can't give that notice.
Well, are we talking about medical or something? I don't think, I
Who knows?
personally don't think there should be any limitations. If somebody dies, you're gonna say, well, you
Right.
didn't give us 2 weeks' notice? But medical is a complete different story.
Well, that's covered in this number 2 here.
Right. It's a complete different story.
Well, that's covered in this number 2 here.
Right. Okay.
Can we build in an exception clause where someone could ask for exception to this rule that we would be passing, and say we would empower someone like the city administrator to make the decision? Because there's always going to be that unusual situation. So we would have our general rule that we would agree on, but then we would have an exception that an exception can be requested. They could perhaps put in a written request for an exception to still receive the pay.
Like civil service review, civil service committee review any.
Again, in number 2, you have that H.
Well, those are just ideas, not all of
That's
these
a great-
have to
these
be in
are
the
great
policy.
ideas.
Yeah, but who makes that decision?
That's what I'm
Well, that
saying.
would be through human resources.
Well, is there a procedure that someone would follow if they wanted to qualify for that?
Yeah, that could be the request process, to have it examined, and make the exception.
So we would perhaps have that orderly, so if somebody incurs this, they would automatically be informed on how to do it.
Yes,
There are, and again, I like H.
yes.
There are, and again, I like H. There are employees that I have dealt with over the years that I am very glad to get rid of.
Right.
And, you've earned your 2 weeks. Take your 2 weeks and be gone. Then I'm not giving a severance package at all. I'm just letting them take their vacation.
What's the policy if somebody's been terminated?
They still get their payout right now.
They pay it out?
Currently, yes. It's their time. We have to.
You take care of the ones who brought you, I feel. If somebody has not been a good employee, that's wrong to make the citizens pay for it. And I think death obviously should pay out. I really, something like that. Or disabilities. But how do you want to handle this? Just come back with something next meeting, or
Yep.
do you have enough information that
Unless anybody has any other.
you think you got a consensus? Okay.
Yeah.
Alderman and
The concern positions, that 2-week period is going to be used for transition. You know what I mean? And whether it's transfer of knowledge, return tools, whatever the case may be, and what risk are we at when somebody has a perceived slight or spat? What risk are we at when somebody has a perceived slight or spat and says, I quit, here's my 2-week notice and I'm not coming in anymore and use all my vacation. But yet, they haven't made any effort towards easing through a transition, or here's where I'm at on this project, or what, you know what I mean? Because it's not all just people that have a manual job. It's what impact other people as well. So I mean, I don't know, do you perceive that to be an issue, or? I mean, other than that, I would agree. If you've earned the time, you should get it fairly as well, that we have time to transition to a new person, or at least, shift workloads around in the meantime.
And honestly, that's going to be different depending on who the person is. Some people you don't want around another 14 or 30
That's
days.
exactly right.
They could be sabotaging your system. You
100%
don't know.
agree.
To have or not to have a policy, and if we are going to have a policy, is it a 2-week notice for everybody? Is it a 30-day notice maybe for the cabinet officers? Do we need a longer notice for them? I don't know what the general consensus is.
Tom?
Under number 2, I think that needs to be expanded in not only a medical issue, but psychiatric issues too.
That would be medical.
So that's behavioral health issues.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying we should have a policy?
I agree that we should have a policy.
Alderman?
I guess to move it along, I agree with the policy, for sure.
Carefully written.
Okay, well, you're right. Carefully written, but we also encourage. I mean, there's to encourage. If somebody doesn't want to be here, we encourage. I mean, there's to encourage. If somebody doesn't want to be here, we need to move them along.
Yep.
Okay, we can request them to give a 14-day notice. It's a request. If they don't grant the request, they leave. They leave. We just move on. I don't want to force them to be here because then they could sabotage it. All sorts of bad things can happen. I think that's my place. That asks them, but doesn't require them. But if they earn the time, they earn the time. Pay it out. Move on. Real simple.
Do we have access to a labor relations attorney that we could see what kind of a policy, kind of a sample policy to?
Sure.
Come up with.
Alderman Barber?
There's some way or some caveat that would allow you to say, you don't need to wait the 2 weeks.
Out of here, bud.
You can leave,
Right.
we'd much prefer that written. We're asking and making that as a guideline for everybody in some form of a written statement about benefits. But at the same time, if we don't want them there, we say you don't have to wait. Tomorrow will be your last day.
The other issue too is what happens if I've used all my vacation. The other issue too is what happens if I've used all my vacation.
Nothing.
Nothing we can do.
Just there's the
Can walk
door.
out.
Yeah.
Unless there's a reason to ask them, like Ed mentioned, that there's some kind of a reason to bring somebody on board or else someone in the department that they could share.
Just there's
Can
the
walk
door.
out.
Yeah.
Unless there's a reason to ask them, like Ed mentioned, that there's some kind of a reason to bring somebody on board or else someone in the department that they could share some duties with, and then we can.
That would
But
be
if there
extending.
were-
That would be extending the employment. But if they have no vacation time, they're not going to be afforded any vacation time.
But if they try to give us a 14-day notice and we walk them out the door, they can get 2 weeks of unemployment.
Of unemployment. That's in 2 weeks.
Well, if they were giving us the 14-day notice.
And if they don't, you typically fight that?
Well, no, because normally they're not, they're going to another job right away. But if we're kicking them out 2 weeks early, before they're going to another job, they have 2 week time period where they're unemployed. We'd have to, end of the month that they leave. So whether they quit on the 1st or the 30th, it's gonna go to the end of the month.
Do they accrue vacation time when they're on vacation time?
Yes.
So we're not only, we're also paying our share of their health insurance.
You've already paid that for the month.
Yeah, depending on what their termination date is.
I would rather see something saying you resign, your health insurance is resigned at the same time. You resign, your health insurance is resigned at the same time. I don't know if we can do it, but
That's a whole nother issue that would be in this policy.
It's pretty traditional for companies to carry you to the last
Yep.
day of the month that you retire or you
Because
Are
they've
terminated
paid their
or you quit.
month's worth of cost sharing.
That's right.
Do you have enough to begin to craft something?
Do we want to take a vote on how many people want the policy and how many people don't?
say it again, please.
Can we take a vote on how many people want a policy that they
Okay.
have to give the notice in order to get paid out? Or how many people think they should just get paid out?
Okay. How many people feel that, let's say the present policy continues?
Where everybody's paid out?
Okay, let's take a roll call, or just all in favor, aye.
What is the current policy?
Current policy is everybody gets paid out their accrued vacation whether current policy is everybody gets paid out their accrued vacation whether they give a notice or not.
Okay, so there's no policy that you have to give it?
Correct.
Okay.
That's no policy, right?
Yeah.
And based on our annual turnover, what might that cost be annually, roughly, ballpark?
It's hard to that it's supplied to in the last 5 years.
And that's why,
It's a couple $1,000.
not even, I guess that's my view now is we don't want to muddy it up. I think if it's a simple way to exit an employee, pay them out what they earned and be done. And not have the policy, just that's for,
Okay. How many feel we should have no policy?
and continue the same way we're doing it now, right?
Right.
That's what
Alderman, oh, okay.
I think I'm gonna go that way too.
Okay, so
It
it's
seems like
4-4. Frank, did you say yes?
No.
No, okay.
I
4-4 and
would think we
2 says majority.
You think there should be a
I
policy?
think
Did
there
you say?
should be a policy.
Okay.
Whatever way that we can dress it up appropriately, that's fair and equitable, but a policy I think we need.
Okay.
Don't you have to get appropriations?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, we can
What if
say
you're not approved?
we're not going to approve it. Sure.
Then you
I
really
mean,
have
like
to
this
Hey, they
one
still
here.
get the payout.
Pardon? This one here that said he's gonna take his vacation and then quit.
Yeah,
And that's why it wasn't
That's the
approved.
tool.
That's why,
Vacation and then quit.
yeah.
and that's why it
That's
wasn't
the tool.
approved. That's why it was put into his file that he left with only a 1-week notice and we paid out the rest of his vacation.
Say it again. What was that?
We don't let them use their vacation out like that, and that's why it did not go into his file as if he gave us a 2-week notice, because his vacation was not approved. He really only gave us a week's notice. He continued to work for us for 1 week, then he left. Yes, because that's
Well,
currently
that's-
what's required of us.
He got paid for it anyway,
Yes.
so you don't have to have it pre-approved,
Well, but he earned it.
because he got paid for it.
Yeah.
Once you
But if
earn
you had a
something,
policy,
It's
Because
earned.
you earn your
Payment be
benefit.
done.
He doesn't have to get approved because he wasn't taking his vacation. He got paid out his vacation.
and if you had a policy that said you must give 2 weeks' notice, and they say, well, I'm leaving in 2 weeks, but I want to take vacation for those 2 weeks, we could say, no,
Yeah.
we're not approving that vacation.
Or we can say yes.
Yes.
And waive the
Say yes,
requirements,
too.
Right.
depending on the individual and the workload they.
I think it's pretty standard in most organizations that people, as a courtesy, give 2 weeks' notice. We can always say, no, we want you out immediately, and we'll pay you your vacation. I think that's.
That's one of the
thing
waive
we can-
requirements we could do.
Yeah, we could do that. However.
Waive
we can-
requirements we could do.
Yeah, we could do that. However, it's just common in most organizations that if you're leaving, you want to be able to transfer knowledge to whoever's taking over or who needs to pick up, whoever's taking over or who needs to pick up. And I think that's, talking about fairness again, I think that's fair for the organization to expect that.
Alderman Barber?
I could see that this could go either way in my mind. I'd like to see that this could go either way in my mind. I'd like to at least see something like a roughed kind of policy and brought back so that we could say up or down with that. I mean, we're just discussing it tonight, so I don't know what just to get some kind of idea. But I'd like to see something roughed out to say, this is what we like about it, or this is what we don't like about it, and then let it go on the merits of having something in writing for us to look at and review.
We still have the option of saying no policy.
Sure,
Exactly.
Right.
sure,
Next
sure.
week.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of leaning to see it as an option, because I like the things that were listed here from Oak Creek as well. So it gives another kick at the can with some verbiage based on our discussion tonight.
No matter what's done, there's gonna be pros and cons.
Sure.
Definitely is gonna, definitely is gonna be. It's not, none of us are gonna like 100% of anything. No policy, there's gonna be something we don't like. So it's tough.
If it makes sense, we can move it forward. If not, we'll just.
Yeah, otherwise we're,
We can move it forward. If not, we'll just.
otherwise we're just saying, well, we don't want the policy, but we don't know what that policy is. So if we can see a policy, and then I agree we should.
Put the pressure on. All right, so Tana's gonna come up with a few different
enough time.
ideas.
I'll give it a try.
Okay. 8, staffing report.
Nothing new from what's on here. Just to run through it real quick, there's still gotten quite a few applicants, but it's to the point that they're all new officer applicants and they all have to go through the academy. We can't get anybody else through the academy, I don't believe, until probably the September class. So those positions are probably going to sit open for quite a while unless we get any more lateral transfer. Those will be sitting here. We have added, I think, 8 new officers recently, though. We continue to take applications or screen people for the planning manager position, the director of administration position, and the director of finance position. Not getting a... The light equipment operator position is finally filled. The secretary position, we did do a change with that. We had a secretary leave in December, I believe. Instead of filling her position in engineering, we moved half of that position, her position in engineering. We moved half of that position to planning and had a person pick up a few of those hours. So that leaves possibly a half-time person in engineering that can be filled. But that won't happen. That decision won't be made for a few weeks or a few months.
Is there an update on the planning manager?
Not yet. I might know more by tomorrow. The accountant and finance clerk, we had 2 positions open. If you remember Greg that used to be here, not been filled for about 2.5 years. We also had our part-time finance clerk leave us to go to a full-time job elsewhere. So we did combine those 2 positions and we had a new AP accountant start 2 weeks ago. And she's working out real well so far. We have found a lateral transfer person that they're doing a background check on, so hopefully that position is filled. We're adding a planning intern and she's gonna start on April 3rd. And we still have a maintenance custodian position open, which we have not gotten any applicants for. Position that they're gonna be looking to fill. And then we expect that a sewer and water tech is going to be retiring the first week of April. So we're trying to start to take applications, but haven't gotten any of those in yet.
Have all these positions given us a 2-week notice? Given us a 2-week notice?
No, not the maintenance custodian.
Have we got any applicants for police from other cities? Other officers from other cities?
Yes,
We have,
yes,
okay.
yes,
We have,
yes.
okay.
Out of the 8 positions that we've filled recently, I'm trying to remember how many were lateral transfer. I would say maybe 2 of those were lateral transfers.
Really?
And I know they have a couple other people that they've interviewed recently. Transfers.
Really?
And I know they have a couple other people that they've interviewed recently.
All right. Any further questions? Next scheduled meeting, April 17th.
I would assume, I'm gonna leave it open at this point, but I would say it's 95% sure we will not have that April meeting.
Okay.
I am on vacation the week beforehand, and I don't assume that there's gonna be anything ready by that time.
Stay
Between the
tuned.
election and vacation, so I would assume we'll probably have a meeting in May.
So move. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?